Hello friends and welcome. I'm Sara Lihz and today we're going to make a super easy pop-up card using two new die sets from Pixidustdesigns. First, we're using the Smores die set. This thing is so cute. I have used this a bunch since I got it just a week or two ago, and it has like some flames and a campfire, and you can have smoke coming up with little hearts, the s'more itself, and then there's like little road signs. Then this is the standing pop-up card die set, and it creates this circular dome, like a half sphere, that you can add a bunch of little pop-up elements into. So I put one together just from some scraps of white cardstock to kind of show you how it works. It is the width of an A2 card, and so if you keep your elements fairly low, you can fit this into an A2 envelope, but I'm gonna make mine a little taller, so it's gonna fit in a 6x6. I'm starting with the flames. There are 3 different layers, and I have a shimmering purple cardstock for the background layer, and then this is like a glitter blue teal, and then finally a little bit of pattern paper. I am gluing them flat. And some other projects I have used like some foam to pop that up and create extra dimension. Right now I'm gluing together the shadow layer for the smoke, and I wanted to use a white shimmer cardstock, but mine is pretty thin. It's 65 pound, and they're gonna stick straight up in the air. Normally, I think the 65 pound would be okay, but I'm giving this to my son, and while he tries to be very gentle with things, he's 9, he just turned 9, so I figured I would just make it a little bit sturdier, and then I cut all of like the tendrils of smoke from this blue glitter cardstock. You could skip the shadow layer if you want. The shadow layer shows you where to put the hearts, but if you didn't want hearts in that, if you wanted to use this bonfire for something else, then you absolutely could skip that step. I have another card I've made where I use the flames to show like an erupting martini glass. And then I have plans to use this with the Woodland Critters die set and have them roast some s'mores as well. It's definitely a lot bigger than the critters, but I think that that's kind of whimsical and fun. I'm adding my hearts here, and I've cut them out of that same purple shimmer cardstock that I used for the background of my flames. It would be really fun to pop those up a little bit, but I didn't think of it at the time. There is just a little bit of overlap then at the top of the flames and the bottom of the smoke tendrils, and I will glue that to my purple layer with some really strong liquid adhesive. It doesn't have to overlap by much, but this definitely holds pretty steady, especially because I put that extra layer of white cardstock in the shadow layer for the smoke. So I'm gonna set that aside to dry because there's a lot of like shimmer, glitter, cardstock. That just needs a chance to really grab on. And then here, I'm gonna start working on all of the craft colored pieces for my card. I'm making 2 s'mores, so I have 4 graham cracker pieces. There's a top and a bottom. And then I have a signpost that I have also cut out of that craft. There are 3 different sentiments that you can put on that signpost. I'm gonna be using the one that says Valentine Lane. And then I'm just adding a little bit of cappuccino ink. It's like a mid-tone brown, just for a little bit of extra dimension. There's some really great debossed details in those pieces, and they really shine and come out if you add just a little bit of ink. It's nothing fancy, right? That was just quick blending. I have a chocolate drippy piece I can add onto the top of my marshmallow, and then I will add that to my 2 graham crackers, and I'm being careful with where I put my glue. These don't completely overlap, and I want to make sure that I don't have glue just exposed on the back. I don't like the look of that from behind, so I'm just being a little bit cautious here. There is a little line at the bottom of that graham cracker, the difference between like the flat top of it and then the side. And so my marshmallow, I've put all the way down to that little deboss line. And then I'm trying to make sure I've got enough of my chocolate showing at the top. So here's that pop-up card base. There are 4 dies. You need to cut 1 of each of the larger dies and 2 of each of the smaller dies. And you can see I have them in columns. On the left, the slits that are cut into the cardstock start at the bottom and go up. And then on the right, the slits start at the top and go down. And I am just sliding those together so that I have an upward and a downward slit going together, and they just nestle in perfectly, okay? You can pick this up and move it. It's not gonna fall apart. It's really sturdy. I find it easiest to start on one side and do all three of those, and then move to the middle and then the far side. I've tried starting in the middle, and for some reason that just is a little bit more challenging for me. For all of them, I start on one side, I go about halfway in, and then I move to the next set of slits, and then the third one, before I try to push it all the way up in there. Otherwise, it's really, really challenging. Then I'm gonna move it, right? I'm just gonna flatten it going both ways, make sure everything is lined up the way that it's supposed to be, and I'm good to go. There are a couple of ways to add your pieces to that pop-up base. And so I'm going to show you several, but do what works for you. And maybe if you're concerned about envelope size, do some of this with an envelope right behind you so you know. I grabbed a piece from my sample pop-up. It's the smaller of the half circles, and it has the slits at the top. And I am just using that to trace lines onto my flame piece. And I'm just cutting slits into the flames. And so this will nestle a little bit down into that pop-up base, right? I'm gonna set it in here, and actually it's fairly sturdy on its own. I'm gonna glue it in, but you could create like a little play set card. Like I'm kind of thinking about this for my kids for Valentine's Day so that they can put things into the pop-up and remove them. This method is also really useful if you're trying to get something not to stick up quite so high on your card. So I've added a little glue and stuck that back in there, and then I'll just use my fingers to press everything securely, and it's good to go. Here I have my s'mores, and I want them to pop up a little more. Like I don't want to lose the s'more because I cut a slice into it and then it's tucked down in there. And so I have grabbed some little 3/4 inch pieces. It's about an inch in between each of the pieces on the pop-up stand. And so those 3/4 inch pieces fit beautifully. I cut them from the same color so that they sort of disappear into the background. You don't notice them too much. And I can get my placement just right and then add them on there. I think they're about 1.5 inches tall, but just play around and see. It kind of depends on which die cuts you're adding to your card. Here I am working on my little stand. I switched from craft to that light blue that kind of coordinates with everything else on the card. And there are a couple of pieces to the Valentine's lane, but a lot of it is connected. So I'm not piecing like one letter at a time, which is sort of difficult. These are very dainty. And so I add little dots of wet glue, especially on pieces that kind of hang out or stick up on their own, like the swirl on the end of the V or the line that crosses the T, the end of the E, things like that. And then for lane, the L is separate, but the rest of it is together. I add my dots of glue and I tap it off on the back of my hand so I don't have glue oozing out everywhere. Plus, this is a black glossy cardstock, and it's just a pet peeve of mine. I don't like glue on things that are supposed to be shiny. I think it stands out an awful lot. I felt like because I'd switched to blue, it was disappearing a little bit into the card. So I cut another piece just from some black cardstock, and I'm going to use that as a drop shadow, and that will just help it to stand out more. I added glue to the back of the blue piece first, and then I layered the black piece down and to the right. For my signpost, I want it to stick up a little bit above that blue sign, but it's kind of whatever looks best to you. And then I will add glue only to the bottom of the signpost and stick that right on the front of my card. Then I can go ahead and start decorating with my remaining pieces. I have another s'more I want to add, and I didn't want it to look like it was just mirroring the piece on the other side. So this one I'm going to add by cutting a little slice through him, and then he will sit a little bit lower than the s'more on the right. I love that as an option for varying the heights. You could also have it kind of sticking up in the air if you wanted to use a little acetate. I would use the heaviest weight acetate you can find or that you have in your stash. That way it has a little more stability. Then I cut some extra hearts. These are the same ones I used to go with the smoke tendrils. I'm adding one each to the centers of my s'mores, and then I will also add one to the very front of my card. There are 3 different sizes really back on those smoke tendrils, and so you've got a bunch of different options there. This is very Valentine's-y, but I have another video where I show you how to make some really quick and easy cards that aren't necessarily Valentine's Day cards. You can use this for birthdays and all kinds of things. I think both of these are just super, super versatile. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you'll give this a try. That pop-up mechanism is super fun. Thank you so much for spending your time with me, and I will see you next time.